Hello, boys and girls. Thank you for joining me, Dan the Storyman, for another book. And the book that we're going to read today is Curious George by H.A. Ray. And look on my shirt. On my shirt are two characters, Tom and Jerry, and they get into a lot of trouble. And they're a lot of funny. They're very funny, but we're going to read a book about Curious George. He gets into a lot of trouble too. Let's see what happens with Curious George. Here we go. This is George. He lived in Africa. He was very happy, but he had one fault. He was too curious. There's Curious George. He likes having fun, but he's curious. Curious means that he's always wondering how things work and what things are, and it gets him into trouble sometimes. It's okay to be curious, but not too curious. One day, George saw a man. He had on a large yellow straw hat. The man saw George too. What a nice little monkey, he thought. I would like to take him home with me. The man put his hat on the ground, and of course, George was curious. He came down from the tree to look at the large yellow hat. There's the man seeing George, and there is George looking at the hat. Uh-oh. Let's see what happens. The hat had been on the man's head. George thought it would be nice to have it on his own head. He picked it up and put it on. The hat covered George's head. He couldn't see. The man picked him up quickly and popped him into a bag. George was caught. There George is, thinking, oh, look at that hat. Oh, look how fun. And oh, the man grabbed him. Ooh, let's see what happens. The man was with the big yellow hat put George into a little boat, and a sailor rowed them both across the water to a big ship. George was sad, but he was still a little curious. George didn't like being taken from his home, but he was still curious. What's going to happen next? Where am I going? What's going on? On the big ship, things began to happen. The man took off the bag. George sat on a little stool, and the man said, George, I'm going to take you to a big zoo in a big city. You will like it there. Now run along and play, but don't get into trouble. George promised to be good, but is it easy for little monkeys to forget? It sure is, but it is easy. There they are talking. What do you think George is going to do next? He's going to go to the big city? Go to a zoo? On the deck of the ship, he found some seagulls. He wondered how they could fly. He was very curious. Finally, he had to try. It looked easy. Is it easy to fly? Can George fly? Uh-oh, what's going to happen? Oh, George, be careful. Be careful. First, he was trying to fly, and then he went into the water. Where's George? Where is George? The sailors looked and looked. At last, they saw him struggling in the water and almost all tired out. Oh no. George tried to fly with the seagulls, fell in the water, and they looked and found him. George, you better be careful. I don't think you're a very good swimmer. Man overboard! More monkey overboard! The sailors cried as they threw a life belt out for him. George caught it and held on. At last, he was safe on board. There is George. They saved him. Oh my goodness, George. Crazy monkey. After that, George was more careful to be a good monkey until at last the long trip was over. George said goodbye to the kind sailors, and he and the man with the yellow hat walked off the ship onto shore and into the city where the man's house was. There's George and the man with the yellow hat going to the man's house. Let's see what happens. After a good meal, George felt very tired. George, after all that trip, that big trip, he probably would be tired. And he crawled into bed and fell asleep at once. There he is, falling asleep in a bed. That silly monkey. The next morning, the man telephoned the zoo. George watched him. He was fascinated. Then the man went away. George was curious. He wanted to telephone too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What fun it is to play on the phone. Oh, how fun that is. Uh-oh. Is George going to get in trouble? Uh-oh, George. I don't think you should be touching the phone. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. George had telephoned the fire station. The firemen rushed to the telephone. Hello? Hello? They said, but there was no answer. Then they looked for the signal on the big map that showed where the telephone call had come from. They didn't know it was George. They thought it was a real fire. Uh-oh. There goes the phone ringing at the fire station, and there they found where it was. They found where the telephone call came from. That's why if you ever in an emergency, call 911. But don't play with calling that because it's very serious. It's only if something is really wrong. Hurry, hurry, hurry! The firemen jumped on the fire engines and onto the hook and ladders. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong! Everyone out of the way! Hurry, hurry, hurry! Wee, 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 wee! Oh, here come the firemen! Oh, what's gonna happen? The firemen rushed into the house. They opened the door. No fire, only a naughty little monkey. Oh, catch him, they cried. George tried to run away. He almost did, but he got caught in the telephone wire. There the firemen trying to catch him. Oh, that monkey. Trouble, trouble, trouble. Oh, George. They caught him. A thin fireman caught one arm. A bigger one caught the other one. You fooled the fire department, they said. We will have to shut you up where you can't do any more harm. They took him away and shut him up in prison. Uh-oh, George was put in prison. Oh, no, George. This is a sad story. Oh, George. George wanted to get out. He climbed up the window to try the bars. Just then, the watchman came in. He got on the wooden bench to catch George, but the watchman was too big and heavy. The bed tipped up. The watchman fell over, and quick as lightning, George ran out through the open door. Oh, no. George was up at the window. The door fell over. The bed fell over. And he ran out the door of the prison. He hurried through the building and out on the roof. And then he was lucky to be a monkey. Out he walked onto the telephone wires. Quickly and quietly over the guard's head. George walked away. He was free. George, I don't think it's good to break out of jail. Oh, George. That monkey. Down in the street, outside the prison wall, stood a balloon man. A little girl bought a balloon for her brother. George watched. It was very curious again. He felt he must have a bright red balloon. He reached over and tried to help himself. There's George up on top of that wall, and he wants a balloon too. Uh-oh, what's going to happen, George? Very curious, very troublemaker. And he grabbed a whole bunch of balloons. Up sailed George, higher and higher. The houses looked like toy houses, and the people like dolls. George was frightened. He held on tight. Oh no, George, you're going to get hurt. Up high like that, holding the balloons. George, what are you doing? George was very happy. Oh, wait. Skip the page. Shh, don't tell. At first, the wind blew in great gusts. Then it quieted. Finally, it stopped blowing altogether. George was very tired. Down, down he went, bump, on the top of a traffic light. Everyone was surprised. The traffic got all mixed up. George didn't know what to do. And then he heard someone call, George! George! He looked down and saw his friend, the man with the big yellow hat. Look, George went right on top of the traffic light, and there's his friend. His friend with the yellow hat. Do you see him down here? Do you see him? He's right down there. He's down there. Look It's right there. George was very happy now. The man was happy too. George slid down the post, and the man with the big yellow hat put him under his arm. Then he paid the balloon man for all the balloons. And then George and the man climbed into the car, and at last away they went. Oh, George is safe. I'm so glad George is safe, and that the man found him. The balloons were paid for, and George drove away with the man with the yellow hat. And they went to the zoo. What a nice place for George to live. Oh, look at that. George is with all of his animal friends in the zoo. He has a balloon, and so do all of his friends. What a great book this is. Curious George. I'm so glad you joined me, Dan the Storyman, for another wonderful book. And I hope you have a great day. Keep on reading with your parents or grandparents. And you have a wonderful day. Toodaloo, ta-ta, and goodbye.